first, our government minister is here.
And earlier this morning, Boris Johnson arrived at the COVID inquiry. He's set to apologise for mistakes made during the pandemic, but he'll insist he got all the big calls right when he starts giving evidence today.
Minister for Policing, Chris Philp, joins us now. Very good morning to you, Chris Philp.
Good morning.
How much should we trust the former Prime Minister's evidence today?
Well, I think that's for the inquiry to determine and for the public to make up their own mind. I'm sure he'll give a comprehensive and honest account of the COVID pandemic. And I think it's important that we use the COVID inquiry to learn lessons. So if we're ever, hopefully we won't be, but if we are ever in the position of facing a global pandemic again, we can make sure our response is as good as it can be.
Why do you think he's going to be honest? You resigned from his government.
I did.
You said that the Prime Minister should resign, given public and parliamentary confidence has gone, and given the importance of integrity in public life. You said there was an importance of integrity, honesty and trust, and clearly didn't think that the Prime Minister at the time had those qualities.
That's right. That's right. That's why I resigned, exactly as you say.
So, why do you suddenly think he's going to get an outbreak of honesty?
well, I hope he's learnt his lesson from that episode. And of course, in an inquiry, he'll be under oath, and it would be, against all of the. It'd be, I think it'd be perjury if you misled an inquiry like this, because you take an oath. So that's what gives me confidence. But the public will obviously make up their own mind, and so will the inquiry. It's worth keeping in mind that the mortality rate in the UK during COVID was about the same as the European average, but I'm sure there are things that we can learn, and it's up to the COVID inquiry to get to the bottom of those. So if ever we are in the, hopefully we won't be, but if we are ever in the unfortunate position of facing a global pandemic again, we can make sure the response is as good as it possibly can be.
Can I ask you a question, Mr Philp, about migration? We're going to hear from the Home Secretary shortly about his talks in Rwanda. We know the government's made an announcement about new, tougher controls on legal migration. The Times reports today that weddings are being called off because the government has increased the salary threshold, which allows you to bring in a partner from abroad to £38,000. They say that you have rejected the advice of your independent advisors, the Migration Advisory Committee, who said that you shouldn't make this change. Is that right?
Well, look, I think the government decided, the Home Secretary decided a few days ago that we do need to address this issue of very, very high levels of legal migration. I mean, the figures were, I think it was over 700,000 for 2 years in a row. We've got to. Let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. We made a manifesto pledge in 2019 to get migration down, and it's important that we actually deliver that. So there's a whole package of measures to make sure that care visas don't get abused. The Migration Advisory Committee did say that care visas were being abused. We're going to clamp down on that. But legal migration was always supposed to be for high-skilled jobs, not for low-skilled jobs, and that's why the salary threshold is being increased. So looking at these measures as a package, the objective is to get legal migration significantly down.
On the question I've asked you, which you've not answered, did you reject the advice of the Migration Advisory Committee? They say the reason you shouldn't have done this is because it's likely to be subject to a successful legal challenge in the European courts because of the fact it will be seen as a break with people's right to be together as a family. So you've rejected the advisors. You're going to be in another legal fight in the courts over another migration change. Seems a bit of a mess.
Well, I don't think it's a mess. I think we're seeing levels of legal migration that are far too high. We've got a manifesto commitment to get them down. We've also got millions of people in the UK who are of working age, able-bodied but not working, that we'd like to get into work instead of importing very large numbers into, for example, into various sectors of the economy.
I keep asking you about the family issue, and you're not addressing that at all.
Well, look, we're looking at this in the round, and on the dependent question, so with students, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've suddenly seen students bringing in large numbers of dependents. We've also seen workers bringing in large numbers of dependents as well. Almost the ratio is like 1 for 1. And, given the pressures on public services and everything else, we do think it is reasonable and necessary just to tighten all of these rules up across the board, because having net migration of over 700,000 for 2 years in a row is too high, it's not acceptable. unacceptable. It does have to come down to reasonable levels, given the manifesto commitment that we are determined to deliver, given the pressures on public services and so on, and given the importance of getting UK residents, UK citizens into work as well.
Can we talk about your specific brief, which is policing?
Mm-hmm.
According to the Office for National Statistics, police recorded robbery offences increased by 11% year on year. Offences involving knives or sharp instruments increased by 3%. Back in 2022, last year, a further increase in burglary reports, a 7% increase from the 2021 figures. Churchill Insurance says more than 500 homes were burgled every day in England and Wales last year. The National Police Chiefs Council committed forces to attend all home burglaries in a new set of standards announced last year. But unfortunately, the response that we're getting from viewers suggests they're not. I'll give you an example. Adrian, we had a robbery nearly 14 weeks ago, more than 30 grand taken. We were given a crime number, haven't been visited once by police. What's going wrong?
Well, I mean, first of all, on the crime figures, overall crime has gone down by about 10% year on year, and it's gone down by 56% since 2010.
Okay, I'm talking about robbery, burglary and knives.
But I wanted to give the context. You obviously picked out like individual figures, but just so your viewers know, overall crime is down 10% year on year and down 56% since 2010.
Which is no panacea to someone who's been burgled or mugged or attacked with a knife.
Yeah, so you asked about burglary specifically. So there was that commitment the police made to the previous Home Secretary about a year ago, and I think it is vital the police deliver on that commitment. And if there is any individual case of a residential burglary not being attended, I think you mentioned your viewer called, was it Adrian,
yes.
Had that experience, they should contact their local MP or better still, their local police and crime commissioner to raise that, because the police have made the commitment. We've delivered record police numbers, more than there have ever been before, by about 3,500. And we've also removed some of the bureaucratic burdens on policing that have been taking up police time. So what I sort of expect in return from policing is for every single residential burglary to get attended. They also committed more recently to always following every reasonable line of inquiry for all criminal offences, and I expect that to be delivered as well. And where that was done in Greater Manchester, where there's a fantastic Chief Constable called Stephen Watson, he started doing this about a year and a half ago. I mean, it sounds like common sense, but he started doing it a year and a half ago, and the number of arrests and prosecutions in Greater Manchester went up by 44% in the space of just over a year. We're now applying that nationwide. And so what I would say is, if any member of the public, any of your viewers, find that the police are not attending every residential burglary, or they're not following up every reasonable line of inquiry, which includes things like running CCTV footage through the facial recognition database, then contact your police and crime commissioner, whose job it is to hold the police to account. OK.
Chris Philp, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's, thank you. It's a remarkable situation where a minister says that if you have been burgled, you should contact your MP because the police haven't attended your burglary.
I know.